Learning the ABC in apartment 123. Here's your look at the NECA Sesame Street Ernie Ultimate Action Figure. The iconic residents of Sesame Street are getting the ultimate NECA's treatment. Celebrate your favorite childhood pal Ernie with this 7-inch scale action figure featuring 27 points of articulation. This figure is a must-have for any fan of the mischievous character. Accessories include interchangeable heads and hands, rubber ducky, framed picture and Bert and Ernie, and the letter C. Just the figure that you need for finding fishies. Before that, we get a closer look at the ultimate Sesame Street Ernie. Let's take the tape measure and see how tall the figure stands. I actually found this one on the Facebook selling group and ordered this from Popeye the Toy Man. Ernie's going to stand at about 5 3/4 of an inch in height. That's going to work out to be a figure that's 14 centimeters tall. Ernie's actually one of the OGs of Sesame Street, even appearing on the first episode in 1969. Sliding over him and bringing in his roommates, here's what the figure looks like along with Bert. Now, based at least on what we've seen so far, we don't really have much in the way of Sesame Street figures that NECA has announced. We've, of course, got the count, but after that, it's just unknown, really, if they're going to be planning to do any figures after that. Ironically, for Ernie's packaging, it lists the figure as Volume 1. Bert would be then Volume 2. Yet, though, Ernie goes out of sequence of the alphabet, and he actually gets the letter C, a capital C, and you can see what he can see. Funny, though, again enough, when we get Bert came included with a capital A. Now, originally thinking, though, that they had plans to do A, B, C, D, in actual fact, NECA had planned to spell their own company name. So when we get ourselves Count, for example, he's going to have the letter E, and then we have an N. I don't know what N yet has been attached to, but the plan is, though, to spell NECA. Now, I hope, though, that doesn't mean we're only going to be getting 4 characters from the Sesame Street. If anything, NECA could maybe spell like NECA Rules, although, again, that probably would be another E in there as well. I do like the look of these letters. Again, while Bert's able to actually have a conversation with his letter, all that really the C can do is exactly what he can. He can only really see. I do actually like, though, that these letters have texturing to them, so they actually look like Muppets as well. Let's move those off to the side. Ernie does also come include the picture or portrait of them that's always seen behind their skits. This is just childhood nostalgia for me. Not only do I remember the skits of Bert and Ernie, Ernie, of course, laughing away, and Bert always getting really ticked off by him. But always, though, in the background, you could always see the portrait of the two characters. It looks just as much like it does from the Sesame Street episodes. Now, you can hang this technically really on your wall. If you look on the back, though, of the picture, there is a hanging hook. If you have yourself like a nail, if you have yourself a thumbtack, or even if you just don't want to damage the wall and you decide to use tape, you could then have this displayed behind the characters. I don't have a wall. I don't really have a wall right now, but just, yeah, take my word for it. The figure, of course, comes with his prized possession. That would be Rubber Ducky. What exactly is Rubber Ducky looking at? Oh, yeah, I see that cobweb up there as well. Rubber Ducky, though, is his prized possession. I go back to referencing, again, Christmas on Sesame Street. Bert's prized possession, of course, was his paperclip collection. Now, when it came time for them to exchange their gifts, neither one of them really had the money. So they went to Mr. Hooper's shop, and Bert and Ernie actually saw a cigarette box, basically just hanging on the shelf like that. He wanted to get that, of course, so that so Bert could have a place to put his paperclips and not lose them. But he didn't have anything to trade for that, didn't have anything to sell. So what he did instead was he traded Rubber Ducky. Rubber Ducky was left behind. When it was Bert's time, though, to go back into Mr. Hooper's shop, he, of course, then wanted to get a soap dish for Rubber Ducky, so there was a place for Rubber Ducky to sit inside the bath. Well, he didn't have anything, so what he did was he traded his paperclip collection. You can probably already see where this is going. When it came time to exchange their gifts, sure enough, Ernie had the cigarette box, Bert had the soap dish, but neither one of them had their prized possessions in order to put those things inside their gifts, until, of course, Mr. Hooper came and saved the day. He would then give back the gifts, and Ernie discovered he got Rubber Ducky back, and Bert finally got his paperclip collection back. The moral of the story was, in the end, I don't know really what would I guess in the end, go into a store where you actually have money. That would be the moral of the story. Rubber Ducky, though, looks cute, looks adorable. We don't actually have ourselves a full-size bathtub that Ernie can sit inside, so we can't break out the song Rubber Ducky and, do the duck, Rubber Duck, and everybody's kind of strangely really dancing all around Ernie while he's sitting naked in a bathtub. But anyways, they'll again be dancing around Rubber Duck, Rubber Duck, 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 Rubber Duck. Anyways, he does come included with a couple swappable hands as well. Now he has, what I've seen at least of images online, he comes with kind of hands, so if you want to have him displayed rubber ducky, I think like rubber ducky is kind of posed like that. He takes the other hand, kind of puts it like this. I don't really know why, really. Really, one of these hands too, I think it's this hand. One of them is actually better suited for holding rubber ducky. You kind of have to have him strangling rubber ducky. And you can have him carrying around rubber ducky that way. Quick take a tally. How many times have I already said rubber ducky? Okay, maybe don't take a tally. If you did want to swap out the hands. Oh, by the way, he also has this hand too, which I guess if you didn't want to strangle rubber ducky as much, you could just kind of brace the duck gently in his hand. To change out the hands, by the way, and by the way, the other hands that he has are a couple of just gestured hands. You just go ahead and remove the hand like that. Whoops, let's not remove Ernie's head in the meantime. And let's just find a hand that we want to use. Let's take this hand here and just plug it back in place. There we go. I think I knocked Bert over in the meantime. I got a concussion. No, stop that. Put him off to the side. The other thing that Ernie comes included with as well is a swappable head sculpt. Now, if you have this head, I mean, obviously there's a very distinct difference between the two. This one's got more of the closed mouth, just smiling face. This one has the open mouth. Maybe he's laughing, I don't know. You know, one thing I was kind of thinking too, that if NECA wanted to get some mileage out of this mold, that's always something we always tend to talk about in these reviews, I would love to see them release the King Tut Ernie in the episode where they actually go inside the museum and Ernie is swearing that the statue is looking at him. I think at one point they could start dancing together. Yeah, I would love them to just reuse, maybe if anything, they would have to use these head sculpts. They obviously couldn't use the same body because the other one is in like a King Tut outfit, but release a King Tut San Diego convention, maybe exclusive Ernie. That would be so fantastic. Unfortunately, one thing I've noticed though with the head of Ernie is it doesn't do a great job at all of staying onto the ball joint, as you probably have already seen. The head does attach, but it doesn't attach very well. First of all, you're dealing with a very short post, and then you're dealing with a ball joint on top of that. If you look at how much Ernie's head goes down, if really, again, we could look at the source material, and the only thing I really have right now is the portrait, Ernie's head technically should go right to his collar. He really shouldn't have much longer of a neck like this. I would imagine the reasoning why they chose to do this was so that the figure could actually have some posability, where you'd be able to move the head around, for example. The problem that goes with that, though, is that Ernie's head is always popping off. Now, this head stays on a little bit better than this head. I found that this head was so difficult, even with hot water, to get to stay onto the ball joint. Again, you just hold on to the torso and just pop off Ernie's head like that and just pop it back in place, or the new head back in place. Again, you can add as much pressure as you want. I certainly would recommend heating this up in hot water, but it just doesn't stay very well. And I think a lot of it has really to do with the fact that, like, there's so much of his head and then there's so very little post to go around. You can plug it onto the head, or plug it onto the ball joint, but it never stays in place. Again, I'm just doing my best to kind of get it in place there. That's what it would look like. But I know the moment I start to move the head around, like it's on the ball joint, but it's barely on the ball joint. Let's stay that at least in place for right now. And then we'll have a look at the rest of the figure. Now, for the rest of Ernie's body, blasted head, blasted head. There we go. You know what? Let's just go back to the head that I know is going to stay better in place. And then when we go to the turntable, then I'm going to reheat the head because I think it's had too much time to cool. Okay, so we're going to go back to this head. Keep it with me. Leave it with me. For the rest of Ernie's body, it is very much similar to Bert's in the sense that the body is kind of more of a softer plastic. Now, whereas Bert would have had vertical striping, Ernie seems to prefer horizontal striping, which honestly, just between you and me, I think it makes him a little fuller. But yeah, this is a much softer plastic. The arms obviously are harder plastic. I think they've done a nice enough job too of matching the colorings of the stripes. The yellow is the one thing that really that stands a little bit more. You don't see it really as much though on his arms, but I think they've matched the colors on what he looks like pretty close. Ernie is one of those characters as well as a Muppet that actually did have real hands. In order to pull that off, like if we bring back in Bert, Frank Oz, when he did Bert, would basically just have his hand underneath, sorry Bert, he'd stick his hand basically inside the torso of Bert, and then he'd use wires to move his arms around. Because though Ernie was actually using a much larger body, usually then, I'm trying to think of it now his name. Jim Henson, thank you. Jim Henson would have his hand inside Ernie's torso, and then he would use one of his hands to then control the other. And then, of course, you'd have another puppeteer over here. This is not really what a puppeteer would look like. The other puppeteer would actually have a completely separate sleeve from the rest of Ernie's body, and then his hand would basically be over here. It's really interesting. You can actually look it up online. Again, Jim Henson would have then provided the voice. The late Jim Henson would have provided the voice for Ernie. But I think for like the most part, it looks really like the character. Sneakers are not one thing we tend to see too often when it comes to Ernie, or Bert for that matter. I think they've done a nice job to sculpt and paint those. Of course, you got himself kind of his more blue slacks. I don't know if they're actually jeans, but they have some posability in there as well. We'll kind of talk about that in a second. Bernie does, again, look the parts. And again, when you have Ernie displayed with Bert, I think you really couldn't do one without getting the other. Now, for the figure's articulation, this is, again, where we're going to have a little bit of a harder time. Ernie's head, in theory, stays on the ball joint, and this head actually does a better job of staying on the ball joint, but even to move it back and forth isn't so bad. It's when you kind of move the head up and down. Maybe that's the thing I'm doing wrong. I shouldn't really be moving it up and down. Back and forth is fine and good, but the moment you kind of move it up, it pops so very easily off the ball joint. And again, this one seems to be even worse. As for the top of the torso, now it's going to also be on a ball joint. You can easily rotate it back and forth. There is a little bit of a crunch where you can move the figure's top torso up and down. Sure enough, Ernie's arms rotate all the way around. You can hinge them out almost at a 90-degree angle bend, just a little less than that. There's a single hinge only in the elbow. I know some people really would prefer double hinges, but I mean, come on, guys, he's a Muppet. I can't imagine really. Are you going to be putting Ernie in karate poses? Probably not. Somebody in the back said that they would. I think, buddy, that's a little weird. An elbow bend, yes, gets afforded to Ernie, and then he also has the arm swivel there as well. Hands rotate all the way around. You can hinge those back and forth. As for his legs, split only that far. You can move them forward, sure enough, and also back as well. There's a swivel there at the top of the thigh. Single hinge in the knee, although with these knees, they're very tight, but you can rotate the lower leg as well. Ankle pivot, up and down it goes, and also an ankle rocker. These figures do also have pegals on the bottoms of their feet. Not that Ernie necessarily really needs a ball joint or a peg joint on the bottoms of his feet. He seems to really stand fine if you have him leaning just right. And of course, bringing back in Bert. You know, to get and review Bert, I mean, it would be a safe assumption to make that I probably would have picked up an Ernie and finally having a chance to look at him. You know, again, like to go back and look at these letters. Initially thinking, again, they were going to be spelling out the letter. In actual fact, they're spelling out NECA. NECA. We still got to get ourselves, I still have to get my hands on the count. Count, of course, the time before it takes me, before I finally get that figure. I don't know still what the letter N is going to be. Maybe it's going to be a big bird. Maybe it might be even Cookie Monster. I kind of feel like Cookie Monster, unless they've already announced it. I just missed the mark completely. Then, of course, we're going to finish NECA. And then after that, I don't know. I mean, maybe we are going to be getting more Sesame Street characters. I certainly hope that we do. I think NECA's done a fine job of giving us the characters that we've gotten so far. And, of course, with Ernie, if you're going to have Ernie, you're going to have yourself the rubber ducky. Shame, though, that he doesn't actually come included with a little soap dish that the rubber duckies could sit inside. But, of course, if Bert's going to come with his prized possession of the paperclip collection, you'd like to think, though, that Ernie's going to come included with a rubber ducky. While they may not have been packaged together, they certainly still live together, and all the more reason why, to wrap up the review for Ernie, had to bring back his best pal, Bert. Both the figures do look the way they do in the episodes. The only thing that's a little losing the illusion is the fact that they have legs. I mean, in really the episodes of Sesame Street, it would be the puppeteer's arm inside the cavities of their torso, and they never end up having legs. Every once in a while, though, you'd see a Muppet doing something, whether it be walking, whether it be dancing. I think there has been dance numbers where Ernie has broken out in dance. Of course, then you'd be able to have the chance to see his working legs. One thing I did want to bring your attention to, though, is if you look on the back of the figure's body, Bert doesn't seem to have this as much as Ernie does. There's a really obvious line that goes from one ear to the other, sort of suggesting the idea that Ernie's head was molded separately, the top from the bottom. Maybe they had to do that in order the way they painted the inside of his mouth. You would kind of ask the question, I asked the question, why wouldn't they have just molded the head as one piece? Not designing or making toys for that matter. I can't really be the bold person to say, like, why wouldn't they have done this? There's probably an obvious reason why they did. At least from the front, you don't see that it's there. Unfortunately, though, when changing out the heads of Ernie, they can be a little troublesome. Because the figure's head is sculpted the way that it is, I guess they did that so the head would have some mobility. Unfortunately, any time of moving the figure around, its mobility causes the head to pop off the ball joint frequently. His accessories still, he comes included with the capital C. Even though really he's the volume 1 figure, so he's really the first in the series, he comes with the third letter. A letter, by the way, though, that doesn't spell out the ABCs, but NECA. Of course, the company NECA. He also comes included with his rubber ducky. I'm glad to see he at least has that. And while Ernie does also come included with the portrait will involve you having to mount it onto the wall. I don't know if I'm going to be using myself a thumbtack or a nail. I might even just take a bit of sticky tack and mount it on the back so I don't leave a hole in the wall. What do you guys think of Ernie? Let me know down below in the comments section. Certainly, though, I think it's to be said that this figure probably could be used again. I mean, both Bert and Ernie has had some costume changes throughout the series, whether it is just catching fishies in a boat, or if they discover that King Tut ruins, where they see Egyptian versions of themselves, where Bert or Ernie's convinced the statue is talking to me, and then Bert proceeds to ask him what's the capital of Delaware. Hilarity ensues. But what do you guys, though, think of Sesame Street's Ernie? Let me know down below. And if you guys have been collecting any of the NECA Sesame Street figures. If you are looking at right now the numbers, we've only really looked at 2. Still want to get my hands on the count. I'm not really sure, though, which character is linked to the letter N. I have a reason to believe it's Cookie Monster, even though I don't think it's been announced. If it has, I'm sure somebody will let me know down below in the comment section. Yeah, if you guys did, in the meantime, enjoy this video, you can do it a solid throw to like. And if you guys certainly did want to stick around for more, make sure you hit the subscribe and make sure you turn on the bell so you're going to get the reminders from YouTube every single time a new video posts. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.